Good evening, everybody. Thanks, Ms. Veena Rao, for inviting me to speak with you. I also want to thank all the audience members for taking the time to attend this event. Now, I also want to recognize Council, but more importantly, the better half, Ms. Renuga Subramaniam. Can you stand up for a second so everybody can see you, because usually you don't come? Thank you. I never imagined that as a child I would one day have the opportunity to move to the United States, become a cardiologist, and eventually start and own a bank. My mother was never given the opportunity to go to school and remained illiterate for her whole life. My father had an 8th grade education and did his best to support our family of 9. I had 6 siblings, including one adopted from a family with even less means than ours. My early education occurred in a small village of about 150 people, without running water, a sewer system, electricity, or even roads. Please imagine a village like that. The one-room schoolhouse taught 18 students from the 1st to the 5th grades, taught by one teacher. There was no chalkboard or even paper, pencils, or pens. We walked to a small river about a half a mile away every 2 weeks to scoop up some sand and bring it back to school in a basket we carried on our heads. We dumped the sand on the floor where we sat and wrote on it with our fingers. The beauty of writing in sand is that all a mistake requires is a swipe of your hand and you start all over. I realize now that we were ahead of our time, living a very eco-friendly lifestyle. We also lacked a clock at the school. So how did we know when to enter and leave the school? Our teacher installed a tall wooden pole in front of the school so we would know when to enter and when to leave for the day, depending on where the shadow fell. A 10 by 5 foot small section attached to the schoolhouse became my bedroom at night and doubled as a kitchen during the day. However, I felt privileged to ride in a bullock cart to travel 2 miles to the nearest bus station to catch the bus to travel to my hometown every other weekend. I remember this period of my life very fondly. I finished 5 years of schooling in 3 years in this simple place, which cemented my lifelong love of learning. Eventually, we got electricity for our rental home when I was a high school senior. Until then, I had to read under the municipal street light at night, since the kerosene lamp at home was not bright enough. I graduated from high school and entered medical school as a merit scholar. I graduated as the valedictorian and received a gold medal. My dad promptly sold the gold medal for household expenses. After being disillusioned with the corruption, I refused to partake in my first job. Then I decided to move to the United States. I was fortunate to get an internal medicine residency position at New York Medical College. 5 months later, my wife Sumitra and my 3-year-old son arrived from India to join me. I worked for free for a year, taking extra shifts at the hospital and at a nursing home to make ends meet. It was a perpetual cycle of exhaustion. My daughter was born while I was doing my cardiology fellowship at a Yale University affiliated hospital. I had a sudden flashback. I was happy to know she could have the opportunities my mother and sisters never had. While practicing as a cardiologist, I decided that opening a community bank would be an exciting, long-term project. I started Quantum National Bank from scratch in 1995, practicing cardiology and running the bank simultaneously. Things went well until the financial crisis of 2008. The banking industry was crumbling around us. 4 to 5 banks were being closed by the FDIC every Friday. Georgia had more bank failures than any other state in the country. Customers were getting into financial trouble and could not pay off their debt. Banking regulators came to my office, sat across the table from me, and said I needed to invest $2.5 million in capital to save the bank. I did. This then turned into an additional $3 million, then $5 million, and so on. In total, I had to borrow $15 million. So, how did I manage? First one I called, and obviously you call your family and friends. I called my son and said, "Son, I need money." He said, "How much?" I said, "Everything you have." And he sent a check 2 weeks later. Then I called my daughter, the same. She's here in the audience here, sitting on the right side. She sent a check a week later. Then I called my brother. Same thing. He sent a check within a week. Then, he may not remember, he called 2 weeks later and said, "Brother, I have a lot of equity in my home. I can borrow the money and send you some more money." I said, "Not yet. If I need, I will call you." Then I called a friend of mine and said, "I need $1 million. He sent me a check within a week. I called a former patient of mine and said, "I need $1 million. He came back a week later on a Friday evening with 4 checks in his hand, each $250,000. He cashed from 4 different banks. None of these people asked me, "When are you going to pay back and how are you going to pay back?" That is a testament to our Indian culture. I also went to a banker in town and said, "Hey, why don't you borrow $5 million from my bank? I will give you. And I want to borrow $5 million from your bank." Good deal. We did that. It's legal, proper. Then I sold $20 million worth of bad loans to my son and his Indian friends. The regulators did not like that. They said, "How somebody in the right mind buy bad loans?" I met the regulators who controlled 850 banks in the Southeast at a conference, I went and introduced himself. John, I'm Dr. Nilagaru from Quantum National Bank. He suddenly looked at me and said, I know you, I know your bank. I do not like your loaning bad loans. Then I said, John, do you know about Indian culture? He said, no. I said, if your relatives come to visit you, how do they do that? They said, typically they stay in the hotel nearby home and then stay for 2-3 days and then they go back. I said, in our Indian culture, if they come, they can stay for a day at our house. They can stay for a month, they can stay for a year. That is our culture. And he said, he just looked at me. Then I said, if you have to loan money to your brother, $100,000 or $1 million, how do you do? He said, Doc, I don't have $1 million. But if I loan $100,000, I will have a promissory note with the dates and time, how to pay, how much to pay and everything. In our case, in Indian culture, I can call my family and friends. They will send me money without any questions. Then he said, okay. But I am still amazed at the willingness of the people to lend me money in these circumstances. I paid back everyone except my children who did not want anything back. What was I thinking during the crisis? I was thinking, did I make the right decision to start a bank? I was comfortable as a cardiologist. And what would happen to us if the bank failed with millions of dollars borrowed in my name? How about all the 50 employees that were working at the bank? How did we survive this period? Decades of getting to know members of my community from various backgrounds, ethnic groups, and interests gave me a pool of innovative thinkers genuinely interested in helping me. We saved the bank and kept all the 50 employees. Year after year after the financial crisis, we were ranked the most profitable bank in Georgia. In 2022, we were the third most profitable bank in the United States. We grew the bank from $5 million in 1995 to $665 million asset bank in 2023. I sold the bank to a much larger $4.2 billion asset publicly traded bank with an excellent outcome. I was happy, they were happy. With my success over the years, it has been important to me to give back to the community. I was the major donor in funding a brand new children's library to be built in Commerce, Georgia, where I practiced. And they were kind enough to name the library after my family. I gave scholarships every year for 33 years while I was practicing for high school students who wanted to enter into medical field. I gave scholarships to the nurses to continue their education. I gave $1 million to the city of Suwannee, gave $500,000 to the city of Sugar Hill to promote the children's programs, children's arts, parks, recreation, etc. Now, finally, I understand that the Canadian forces will only recruit people with a history of overcoming hard times. I fulfilled that. Resilience and perseverance have been vital to my success, but not enough. Without integrity, there is no meaning to your success. Be open to learning from those around you, especially with whom you have little in common. A sincere interest in the stories of others can take your life in remarkable directions. Thank you for your attention.
Wasn't it amazing? Perseverance, integrity, and resilience. Thank you so much, Dr. Nellagaru.